We good? Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. Time to call to order the parking and safety meeting for May 16th. Elaine, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Chairman Schaefer?
Here. Item number 2 is approval of the motion summary of the Parking and Safety Committee special meeting held on January 4, 2016. Mr. Clerk, you transcribe.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Chairman Schaefer?
Yes. Before we get to public comment, we have some housekeeping we need to take care of. As this is the first official meeting of this group for the Parking and Safety Committee. So one of tonight's charges will need to elect a chairman and a vice chairman before we move on. So open the floor to motions for chair.
Make a motion for Mr. Schaefer as chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And motion for vice chairman.
I make a motion for Mr. Hollander to be vice chair.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Take care of that. We'll proceed for public comment. This is the time for comments from the public. We will need everyone to make comments tonight to step forward to the desk and give your name and address for the record. So we have people here have comments on items that are not on tonight's agenda.
My name is Darcy Hooks. I live at 159 Cheshire Crossing Drive, and I am on the board for Cheshire Crossing neighborhood and was somehow elected to come to you guys tonight. We have a couple concerns, and I know we've had studies and things like that up speed, but what I noted last week when we had a police officer in our neighborhood, it was at 8:30 in the morning after everybody had left for work. I happen to live on the main drive, which becomes the drag strip during rush hour, whether it be in the morning or in the evening, and with summer 2 weeks away, and our kids are constantly outside. And my kids are old enough to be outside, but I don't allow them outside without supervision, and they're teenagers, preteens, because of the traffic. I do have one son that's blind, and we do have blind child at play signs 100 yards on either side of our house. They do no good. We still have the speed. I've told that officer that came and said, you can sit on my driveway, I don't care, but you need to come during travel times. We also have concerns with the speed on Cheshire coming into the neighborhood. When I was talking to that officer, he suggested having more than one sign. There's a 35-mile-an-hour sign right when you turn off at 23 to Cheshire, and then you don't see it ever again. And people he's pulled over, he has said that they say, well, that was just, they didn't even note that one sign because they were busy turning. So he suggested that we ask for maybe a signage closer to the neighborhood to state 35 to remind them. Plus, we're putting in, with the help of the city, a crosswalk so that our side of the neighborhood can get to the park that's on the other side by the water tower. And I live 6 houses in, so I see the Cheshire traffic. That isn't going to help unless we have that reminder, because my kids will not be allowed to cross that crosswalk because cars are not going to understand you have to slow down. Even the pedestrians have the right of way, that doesn't seem to help. And then we had another incident reported with Crystal Petal and Cheshire Crossing. So it's the 2 main drags where they come together. A child was being walked to her bus stop, which is on the far side. And as she was stepping out to cross, a car ran the stop sign, and if her dad hadn't been there, would have been hit. So, and that we understand it's our people that live in our neighborhood, but I don't know if we need more signage, if we need flashing lights that say 25. This could be your child, because living on the main drive, it's a concern, and it's quite frustrating. I know speed bumps are out because of it being an emergency, and we've gone through all of this. But we would really like help from the city to figure out ways of lowering speed and keeping it monitored, or I don't know. We're at wit's end as far as concern and safety.
What were the times that you were having the most problem with speed?
It's middle school, high school, when it's at those times, especially in the winter when it's dark. Those kids are standing at bus stops on corners, and people are running in and out of the neighborhood to get to work. So it'd be when you guys leave for work.
Morning rush and evening rush.
Yes, 3 summers ago, we have several state patrol officers that live in our neighborhood, and we're blessed for that. But I was standing at the end of the driveway talking to a friend, and he went speeding down the street on his way home. No lights on, no marked car, so we knew it was a state patrol officer. But I'm like, that's one, he's setting an example that's very poor. I went and wrote him an anonymous letter and taped it to his front door because we had those street signs for blind child at play. And I'm like, of all people that need to be setting an example for others would be people in marked cars. So it's, I don't know. And I don't know how you guys would fix it, but, you know, and we get increased patrols, but we get them for a couple weeks and then it's gone. And then everyone goes back to their, oh, let's see how fast we can get from one end of the street to the other end of the street before I have to stop to slow down to turn on to Cheshire. So, and they are city streets and we're paying city taxes, and it would just be great to have some help.
Right.
We have 60 plus kids in the neighborhood, so that's a lot of lives that are at risk.
Yeah, I can just address a couple of these briefly. Thank you for your comments, first of all. We've performed a few different speed studies in the area, stealth studies, to determine what the level of speeding is. And fortunately, the issue, like in all neighborhoods, it's residents that live in there that are doing most of the speeding. And it doesn't fall under any of the criteria in terms of the highest level of enforcement, like adding stop signs or things like that. And it's not to say there's not people that 35 or 40 miles an hour in the neighborhood, because they do. What we can do on the Cheshire Road especially, we can look more at that in terms of reminder signs and trying to get a better.
There's one speed sign on
Right.
the entire strip.
And it's pretty typical, you just, because of sign proliferation, we just don't put too many, but if we have an issue, there's certainly something we can look at. Additionally, within the neighborhood too, there's additional signage that we can add into a neighborhood. With the way the studies are performed now, it actually gives us output that shows us when the peak times are that people speed. And it's pretty well what you think. People going to work, people coming home to work.
Right.
But what we share that now, the police department, and it lets them pinpoint enforcement to very specific times and trying to give tickets out to those who are, really driving offensively in the neighborhood. So we can do more of that. You mentioned the crosswalk project we are working on. So I think we will take more look at that. Your problem is typical to probably any subdivision neighborhood where people have children and cars tend to go faster than they should. People are distracted. So but there are some, and I'm not sure if anyone talked about some of the neighborhood speed enforcement programs we have as well that we can follow up on, or our community resource officer can follow up with you specifically on. And that involves involvement from the neighborhood actually trying to target some of the specific speeders.
I'll sit out there and go.
Yeah, I mean, that's
What, at the least, can we take the speed wagon out there?
I think we have
Radar.
that scheduled to go out
Yeah.
if it's not already out there.
We haven't had any type of flash thing that tells you how fast
Yeah.
you're going.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't had that. That'd be awesome.
We've talked to Mr. Adams too, so he has the guide for the residential speed stuff.
When do you
as
think
well.
that'll be out there, Chief?
I glanced at a request. I think
Oh, okay, I'm
someone said to send it out there. I'm not sure where it's
Okay, that's
slated
fine.
right now, but we'll make sure we get it out.
We can make the commitment that we can do
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
What's that called?
I call it a speed wagon.
Yeah,
our speed trailer.
Yeah.
Our speed trailer, yeah.
A big speed trailer.
Kids will think this.
And we can follow up with you directly if we get
Sometimes too much.
your phone number with the lane, then we can follow up with you in terms of the neighborhood speed enforcement program and see if you're interested. Thank you.
Just a flashing lights on that one child sign, like, I don't know. If he's 12, he should be able to walk the neighborhood and do what other 12-year-olds do. And I can't let him because of the way traffic is. And it's the main street. There's no curbs, there's no nothing. It's just a
Right.
runway. is what it is.
If we set the speed trailer down there, you have any areas you think would be most beneficial?
Probably in the middle.
Okay.
I mean, I'm at 159. I don't care. Park it in front of our house. But because you want to catch the people turning off the Crystal Puddle, getting their speed up.
Okay.
So you wouldn't want it too close to that because they won't be up yet.
About 4 lots, I think 4 lots further north would be about the middle of that road. You said you're 6 from
I'm
Cheshire.
6 from Cheshire.
Okay. Good.
We'll continue to pay attention to that and feel free to come back and talk with us.
Yeah, this, with that crosswalk going in, it's a great idea. If traffic doesn't mind itself with the white stripes on the road that I'm imagining, that's not going to be any safer either.
Between our engineering staff and the police department, we'll continue to work with you because we realize that what a concern it is. It's not only your neighborhood. I mean,
I'm sure it's not.
and we're limited, it's appropriate, but we'll do what is appropriate and try to address it. And again, stay in touch with us and let us know
We
if
appreciate
it's
it.
better or worse or whatever. Thank you. Anyone else public comment for tonight? Okay, if not, go ahead.
My name's Patricia Stout, and I live at 175 West Fountain. And my car, I was involved in an accident at the intersection of Fountain and Liberty. And this was in November. Both cars were totaled, and I've sent Chief Pijanowski an email detailing my experience at that intersection. I live on Fountain. I live within a block of the accident, and I was traveling west on Fountain and stopped, and then proceeded into the intersection where I was hit by a car that could not stop. But I'm not saying, I mean, I was sighted, but I pulled out in front of a car I didn't see because the Liberty goes down into a dip. It was dark. It was about 5:15, November 18th. And so also people park along the curb close to the stop sign on Fountain. And there's very little visibility as you look north. And that's where the car was coming from. So I pulled out into the intersection, was hit on the right side of my car. My car was thrown diagonally across the intersection. The left front took off the stop sign, and I landed between the sidewalk and someone's yard. I do have photos. If you're interested in seeing those, is that appropriate?
The chief emailed this to us earlier today.
Yes, I did.
But, you know, we all have.
This is,
Oh, okay.
this is an agenda item too.
Right, right.
Okay, well, should I wait until then to speak?
Oh, feel free, we're going to address this next, but feel free to give us your comments.
Oh, okay, well, I thought that was the last time for anyone to speak publicly, so I could wait till you're in the discussion of it, but I'm certainly in favor of a stop sign, so.
Well, that's the next item on our agenda. So
Okay,
we can
well,
discussion. If you want
wait.
to add to the discussion, just step back up.
I
and
would
we can do
probably
that.
like to add to the discussion.
Okay. Anyone else for public comment tonight? If not, we'll move on to our discussion items, and the first of which is this issue, the multi-way stop sign at North Liberty and West Union Street. I believe,
Defer to Matt tonight.
Matt?
Yes.
Yes, start with you.
Filling in for Jessica. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The original request came in various forms, be 2 years in July. And I want to just briefly go through the history because we have a new makeup here at the committee. So I want to give a brief history. Originally, we immediately went out and did some counting, and I'm going to nutshell it here for you. But we went out and recounted, make sure we did it at the appropriate time of the year. We had a meeting. We encouraged public involvement in that meeting. There was some uncertainty on how many people were notified. So I do want to make sure you understand that it wasn't necessarily maybe a broad survey as one of the residents followed up and did later on. But that night there was a large majority, I'd say 6 or 7 people that were in favor of the 4-way stop. So, you know, it looked as if we were going that route. I think it's a good thing that we took some time to really examine this and make a careful recommendation because we've had time for another resident to go out and canvass the neighborhood, and we've had also some time to reflect on the cobblestone 4-way stop that was put in. And in a nutshell, I think that there's a really, in our minds, from an engineer standpoint, boils down to a couple important points, and that is that it's not warranted based on several criteria, okay? And that's key. But we do have a local policy that does work. We feel it does work. We think it's a good policy. A resident has followed the policy. He got an overwhelming majority against. We have no reason to think that was not a legitimate survey. And that being one factor, and 2 being the fact that we really feel that it would be wise to do some countermeasures first at the intersection before we would recommend a stop sign go up. And that's what our training tells us to do. Because the last thing you want to do is put it up and then take it back down because of some unintended consequences. So I guess I'm here tonight to answer any questions you may have based on the memo. But all things considered, this is not an easy recommendation to make by any means. But we are confident that there are some steps we've already taken out in the field. We've enhanced some striping. Possibly one thing that just came to mind as, ma'am, you began to speak was, I don't know if there's tree trimming that we could do or anything at that intersection to improve sight distance. That's something we can go out and take another look at now that we're in full bloom, with the trees and the leaves and such. But the cross traffic does not stop placards that we recommend in our memo. They do serve a purpose. And even me as a driver, take my training out of it. Just as a driver, I do tend to rely on those quite a bit. They're very helpful. It's a good reminder. So, and lastly, I think it's, in my mind, from a professional standpoint, is meeting with the schools and getting their input, which was no input. And that was significant for me because they pointed out that if we do put a four-way stop up, they cannot provide crossing guards at that intersection. And that was a little bit swung the pendulum in my mind, quite frankly. And I think that it's a good plan for the schools to educate the parents to have their students stay on the east side of Liberty and come down to the four-way stop where they will have crossing guards and cross at Hefner. And I think if we implement the countermeasures and the school follows up and educates the parents, and we have time to monitor the intersection, and if an accident history does not develop. I know there has been accidents. I'm not saying they weren't severe and they weren't painful, but there are certain criteria of number of accidents, and it's 5 within a 12-month period. So bottom line is we're recommending that we do some things first before putting up the sign, see how that works. And those are outlined in the memo, the placard.
And you actually looked at a number of criteria other than just the number of accidents according to your memo.
Right.
And, okay.
Mainly revolving around volumes, volumes from each approach.
I wanted to just add one more thing too, because I know this is a difficult issue we face. And the reason why the criteria is in place, I mean, there's some obvious reasons. But what we're seeing at the cobblestone installation, the same thing we're seeing at the Grandview installation, that's what we tend to call proliferation of more to stop signs. Stop signs are to serve a purpose, and you really have to get control of right away because someone can't pull out from the lesser road because there's not enough gaps in the main road. That's what stop sign does, establishes right away. When you put a stop sign in not for that purpose, you have unintended consequences, which Matt's talked about. What we registered out on Cobblestone, that's been out there for some time now, and we wanted to look at how effective it was, and we surveyed, and we found only 2 in 10 vehicles actually stop at the stop sign. 70% of the vehicles roll slow, then roll through the stop sign. 10% of the vehicles actually roll through fairly quick with very low slowing. So that's because when you put stop signs up and people know it's unlikely there's not a lot of traffic on the other street, they tend to get less cautious and just they break into these habits. That's one of the negative impacts of putting stop signs that aren't warranted strictly by the criteria established right of way. Our policy we adopted was to give more control into a neighborhood to allow them, even though a policy might strictly say you can't put it in for right of way, if a neighborhood really wants something, and it's not on a major street or impact emergency services, we give the neighborhood that authority. In this particular case, the neighborhood worked together, and I think Mr. Fellinge is here tonight, who actually did a lot of the survey work. And the neighborhood, I believe, spoke out through the survey and largely said this is probably something we really don't want in our neighborhood. So I think that's important because that's why we created that policy, to let the neighborhood have a voice in what goes on. And that's where we landed with this. So
you're recommending a warning sign at the stop sign that indicates that the cross
Traffic
doesn't stop, and then
Right.
you'll continue to monitor for accidents, etc.
we can look more at the site distance issues that were discussed tonight to see if there's
Okay.
parking restrictions or tree trimming or removal that could be done. It's an older neighborhood, so conditions change over time. So that we can do those things and obviously always enforcement. We can always look for enforcement or speeding issues through there.
One of the, and I travel Liberty all the time, every day. And on my way down here, I came down Liberty and I was looking and just, as you go southbound from Pennsylvania on Liberty, the first 25-mile-per-hour sign you see is south of Central. There's none on going southbound. Now, northbound, there's one just north of the Smith, once you get out of the school zone, north of Smith, and the next one is just north of Central. So there is nothing in that general area.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's quite common, knowing that that is a collector street, that really you get used to probably having a little bit of speed. And you know, I don't know, maybe I'm all against the proliferation of signs. You know, we all know we have way too many signs, but could possibly something along those lines help in that area help?
It may, and there's nothing codified that says we can't add additional speed control signage in a neighborhood. There's a minimum we have to have in, but there's really not a maximum other than we don't want to decorate a sign in everyone's front yard. But something we can certainly look at again too, is one more way to maybe enhance or remind people that there are speed limits and controls in the neighborhood.
Jones, anything?
I think Ms. Jones covered it pretty well.
I'd like to comment.
Step back up so we can pick up the audio, please.
I just truly want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, because you were talking about two intersections. Are you speaking that you will have a cross line doesn't stop kind of thing, and you're putting that signage up on Fountain?
Exactly.
You will put that up?
It'd be attached to the stop signs on Fountain, reminding the driver that you got to be careful. You don't have the right of way.
Cross traffic does not stop.
Right.
I think that's great. Also, I think it would be helpful to have restricting parking signs on Fountain, especially on the, I'm not good with directions, but it would be the northeast corner, because that's the one in particular where I stopped much further behind the stop sign, and even if you get closer, you can't see over a car that's parked there. That's what I'm saying, that the visibility looking north from that corner is very poor.
At the stop bar,
At the stop sign.
which corresponds with the stop bar, yes.
Right, but there isn't anything on the street, actually. There's no bar marked on the street.
Okay.
There is no bar on that street.
May have worn off. May not, I don't know for
Well,
sure.
I mean, it's been, how long since November since I had my accident?
Right.
There's still nothing on that street. So having something that says cross traffic doesn't stop would be excellent. I'm not unreasonable, but I do still think it's a reasonable thing to have a stop sign there, because there's summertime, there's lots of people who ride bicycles, and I have another email from another neighbor, John Yerian. Did you get that, sir? John's, he has 4 children and they're always on bicycles, so I have an email from him that I'll share with you. The other thing I wanted to mention was, in regard to the neighborhood, I did not know, I actually thought, even when I had my accident, that this had already been decided. My son told me that it had been decided, that there were, you know, at the accident itself, my son said just 2 nights ago, they decided to put the stop sign in. Oh, man. But, so when Mr. Fellinger came around, I did talk to him, and I, of course, did not sign his petition, but I thought he was countering something that had already been decided on. I didn't know that that was going to be the reason you made your decision. And I talked to a number of the same people that signed his sheet, and they were, especially when they saw my picture and heard my story, they were very much in favor of a stop sign. So if you think the whole neighborhood is in favor of this, I'm not so sure that's true. I know the ladies who live on the corner there where the accident occurred did not sign. So, I mean, I don't agree with the fact that the neighborhood is all in favor of no stop sign. So I'm not going to go along with that.
Oh, no, I wasn't, sorry if I gave the impression it was not anywhere close what our policy is written is that 75% of the surveyed residents, if they are in favor, then that meets the criteria. In this case, it was 75% against. So,
75 against
yes.
the criteria. And the neighborhood is what, all of Liberty?
I can give you a copy of the survey that is embedded somewhere in here in my packet, and I'm looking through to find it, but I'd be happy to go make a copy for you.
And Mr. Fellinger's here tonight.
Yeah.
Do you want the other email?
Yes.
I noticed I received that at
Did you?
4:30, but I haven't been in the office,
Yeah,
so
it
if
was later this afternoon. Okay, well. My best.
But we appreciate your comments, and we certainly understand having been involved in an accident there, this is a high priority.
Well, I mean, it was, you know, a $25,000 car went down the tubes in 2 seconds as I drove away from a stop in the stop sign.
Right, right. And, you know, it's always, these are difficult situations for us, because on one hand, we have the engineering standards, and on the other hand, we want to listen to the residents of the neighborhood as well, and try to make the best decision we can. And as Mr. Farino stated, we don't want to overdo the use of stop signs because people start to ignore them, but we're always walking that fine line. So what I think we'd like to do is try the approach that our engineers have recommended in terms of the cross traffic does not stop, and looking at the clearance from the visibility of the intersection and maybe parking, see if that makes an improvement in the neighborhood, and certainly could revisit this issue at another time if it doesn't appear that that's going to take care of it.
Yeah, I certainly hope it wouldn't take an accident for you to revisit it. And I also want to say that many of the things listed on the memo that Mr. Fellinger put out just don't really make sense. In other words, I've stood out there at 6:30 in the morning when the emergency squad was traveling Liberty, and they do slow down, but they turn off their siren at the intersection. So, you know, it's just not, it's not unreasonable to have a stop sign at that intersection. I recognize you have standards and procedures, but it's not unreasonable. If you put up a stop sign in that intersection, I'm sure no one would complain about it.
Well, my biggest fear as a professional is that giving those kids walking to school a false sense of security, folks are going to stop.
I understand.
And I was not concerned about it going up, quite frankly, a year ago. But one of the most important things I found out was that the school would not put a teacher down there or a crossing guard. And that's significant to me.
Well, but it's also significant for the need of a stop sign. In other words, there's going to be nobody helping after school hours. It's really not the after school hours that concern me so much, because it's when kids are goofing off and riding together and skateboarding and all the other things that go in that intersection.
Yeah, just unfortunately, like that argument could be made almost at any intersection in any neighborhood.
Sure.
And that's why there's standards, because frankly, if we put a stop sign at every place someone wanted a stop sign, no one would pay attention to stop signs, period, because they realize they're just there. They're not there for a code, for a codified reason or a study. They're there just because someone asked for a stop sign and justified it in their neighborhood. And now we have a situation that Matt's talking about where people just really, I just read off some statistics about already the neglect of stop signs. Proliferating that neglect is a real concern, because you actually can increase accidents with putting stop signs without warranted, and you really can put pedestrians at risk by giving them the false sense of security that someone's going to stop at that sign when they walk out. And we don't want to create this situation. There are rules, and it's nationally that these rules are developed. It's not just Delaware, it's not just Ohio. So we try to respect those rules. We believe there is some measure of science and reason behind them. So I know it doesn't necessarily give the results you want, but like we said, there are additional things we can try to do to enhance safety, enhance the notification of the intersection or the risk. But just putting a stop sign is not necessarily always the answer for that.
Well, I'm certainly not wanting to be unreasonable, but rather than, I understand all of that. I don't travel that way anymore. I do not travel from Union west on Fountain, stop at that intersection, and then go through. I do not do that anymore because you cannot see to the north. So anything you can do, I don't know what you could do to improve that, but you really can't see until you get in the intersection.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I have a copy of the survey for you.
Okay, thanks.
So we have a recommendation from the engineers to put a through traffic does not stop on the following street stop signs and to re-examine the intersection for visibility in terms of trimming and parking.
So I make a motion to approve staff's recommendation for the parking signage and study on Fountain Street.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hellinger?
Yes.
Chairman Schaefer?
Yes. Okay, before we move on with discussion, I wanted to follow up with that one since we had public comment on it, but we're going to take a break barring objections from the committee. And Justin is here from our parking consultants, UKSD Consultants, and he's going to give us a brief overview of what they're doing in terms of the survey of downtown parking and their process for recommendations.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
The moment I'll get this back up on the screen.
I've got it pulled up just in case.
Well, it was working earlier.
I didn't touch it.
There we go. All right, thanks everyone. Let's see if this works. Thanks for having me this evening. Again, I'm Justin Goodwin with MKSK. We're a planning, landscape architecture, urban design firm based in Columbus, and we're the lead consultant for the downtown parking study, partnering with Trans Associates. So we've just gotten going over the past couple of weeks here, and I'm happy to give you an overview of what we've done so far, where we're headed with this project. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible to respect your agenda, and I appreciate you moving me up on the agenda. A number of slides here, but I'll try to go through them pretty quickly. So I'll just give a little bit of overview of our process, some of the things that we've observed thus far, and then next steps for this project. So again, MKSK and Trans Associates were the planning consulting team on this project. We're working with city work group, including Kent, the city manager, Jackie Walker, and Dave Eflin. We have a larger steering committee, folks on the screen here, of various people with a vested interest in downtown in general and improving the parking situation. And we're also engaging the public in a couple of different ways. You may have seen the survey that's been out and about online, and with little postcards in some of the coffee shops and whatnot. I realize this is a little difficult to see on the screen, but the schedule here, we really got going in earnest at the beginning of May, and that's what we call our Project Immersion Week. So we were up here basically the whole week, the first week of May, doing a variety of things, talking with various stakeholders, engaging people on the street, asking them a series of questions about their parking experience downtown, collecting field data, taking lots of photos, and we're in the process of analyzing all of that information right now. And what we'll be doing with that is, once we have a full understanding of our assessment of the current situation with parking downtown, we'll be formulating a series of preliminary recommendations. We'll meet back with the steering committee at the beginning of June, and we'll refine that. So by the time we get to the end of June, the intent is to have a draft set of recommendations. So this is a very quick process. We're trying to be respectful of the city's resources and provide a series of short, medium, and long-term recommendations for City Council to consider at their meeting in July, so that they could potentially, if there are potential recommendations that might have a budget impact and might be a high priority, that those could be considered this year.
So I'll go through a series of slides here just so everybody can have an understanding of what we're focusing on. Downtown Delaware, the study area is essentially Spring. No, this doesn't really work on this slide, but Spring Street at the south up to Lincoln at the north, generally Franklin and Washington to the west, and 23 to the east, and then the 6 core blocks of downtown from Central down to Spring, including William and Winter, Sandusky, Union, Franklin. Obviously, you're all familiar, this isn't the first parking study that's been done for downtown, so we're about 10 years out now from the 2006 downtown parking study, so that provides a good groundwork of information and recommendations that we're reviewing and building on. At that time, as you may be aware, there's a really great inventory assessment of how much parking is in downtown. And what we're looking at now is how is that parking getting used. And some things that have happened over the past year or so, the new signing wayfinding that's been installed. So we're looking at what sort of impact has that had, and adjustments to the fine structure that have taken place over the past year as well. And then the 2008 comprehensive plan doesn't address parking so much in downtown, but the importance of downtown as the center of the community, and parking is one of many aspects of downtown. So preserving the historic community character of downtown is as important as resolving parking issues. So a few of the downtown anchors you're all familiar with, the Strand, the courthouse complex, various locations that people may be going on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. The inventory that we have right now, we're updating this, we're working with the city to update the full inventory of all the parking spaces in downtown. It may be a little difficult to see on this slide, but there are these dark purple dots all over the place. There are about 3,300 parking spaces in downtown in total. And a little over half of those are privately owned surface spaces, the remainder being on-street public spaces or surface spaces. And those are broken down. I won't get into all the weeds here, but those are broken down in lots of different ways. Time restrictions, some are signed but not metered, but have time restrictions, some are metered, 3-hour, 10-hour, 30-minute. So we're taking a look at all of that, the distribution of those restrictions throughout downtown to really understand the full system that's in place today. Again, just more ways of classifying the spaces. So we have the public lots out here at William, at Franklin, behind 1808, some of the other public lots that are sometimes available, like here at City Hall, at the Hayes lot, the courthouse complex. So really just understanding the full distribution of where spaces are available at different times of the day for different users. And then again, the private parking, so about 1,700 privately owned spaces located throughout downtown. So some of the other things we're doing to gather information, did anybody see the drone in the air a couple of weeks ago? So we partnered with Infinite Impact, they're based in Powell, drone operators. What we want to understand is not just where the parking is, but how it's getting used. So there are a lot of ways to do that. We're trying to be as up to date as possible for ways we can collect information. So we picked a couple of days in that first week of May, Tuesday, and it was actually First Friday, and we did hourly flights all through downtown. So this is one of the shots. So we can understand how parking is getting used and changing, the use is changing throughout the course of a day. And then we just have one flight this past Friday to get a check on the non-First Friday day at the peak time. And what we'll do with that is we'll look at both the occupancy of parking, the primary public parking lots and on-street spaces, as well as how it's turning over through the course of the day. So how long are people parking in certain areas? So just to give you a little taste here, we haven't gotten into the details of doing the analysis, but we'll be doing that over the next week here. So it's actually turned around. This is looking south is to the north. And this is Sandusky over here, and Franklin over here. So the public lot between Franklin and Sandusky at 8 a.m. And then at 9 a.m. you start to see people arriving. 10 a.m. you see more, and you can kind of see, during the lunch hour, and then you're starting to get saturation of that parking lot through the course of the day. And then about 4 p.m., Sandusky's clearing out for First Friday and then setting up, and you see the lot's pretty much full here. And now First Friday's going, lot's still full. So that's the sort of thing that we're able to do with the drone photography, is all through downtown, really have an understanding of how that's changing.
Real quick question, Chief.
Yeah.
Pazinski, that lot there, are those 10-hour?
The mix.
I just noticed there's about 6 cars there. They're there all day, the slides.
Yeah, and that's the utility of doing this sort of analysis. Also, I mentioned we interviewed a variety of stakeholder groups, including downtown business owners of a variety of types of businesses, Main Street, Delaware, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Chief of Police from Ohio Wesleyan, various property owners of the Northwest neighborhood, and got a lot of great feedback from that group, all of those groups. Again, I mentioned the public survey. So to date, as of this morning, we've engaged over 500 people, either through the online survey or actually on the street while we were here that first week, and getting a lot of great information. And also just some themes, a lot of text on the slide, but just general things that we're hearing. A lot of recognition that the new wayfinding signs are doing a good job, but there's still confusion about where people can park in certain lots or at what times. Or whether or not it's public or private, because those are very close together. I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. But there's also a level of community knowledge about where you can park, even if you're not really supposed to park there. People who come downtown all the time, they know where they're not going to get towed. Definitely a lot of concern about how employees are using prime spaces. Again, nothing new. It's a pretty common issue in downtown areas. Concern with the recent increase in parking fines and whether or not that's too much of a deterrent for the first-time visitor to downtown, but also a recognition that it has been effective in changing behavior. So that's a good thing. A lot of people have said, there seems to be a perception issue that it's too far to walk from some place that might be only a couple of blocks away. So, and that's something that was addressed in the 2006 study as well. So what we'll look at here is both the supply of parking, the demand for parking, and then how it can be managed to hopefully make that existing system work better for everybody. And a lot of discussion about whether or not there should be more parking, and specifically a garage has been mentioned by a number of folks, and I'm sure that's nothing new to you either. And these things were repeated and discussed. We had really good discussion with the steering committee at the first meeting in that week. So some of the things that we're looking at is, one, really trying to understand through our turnover and our occupancy analysis. That will help to tell us how employees and where employees are generally parking. And hopefully we can come up with some recommendations to improve that situation. Maybe looking at different ways to structure fees and fines, or different ways to deal with metering, whether it's existing meters or where prime spaces are in most demand, and how those should be charged or not charged at certain times of the day. Looking at the difference between a special event condition like First Friday or the Arts Festival versus a more typical day, and making sure that we're developing recommendations that cover all of those situations. So this is the survey, if you haven't seen that, and it's still available online. We're going to ramp that down now. We've gotten really good success rate with getting input there. And I'll just quickly go through some of the things that we've heard through the surveys at this point. So the people we've engaged thus far, the vast majority are coming downtown more than once a week. And a lot of those people are parking for 1 to 2 hours. That's the typical amount of time that people, at least that we've engaged, they're spending downtown. The majority of people have said that they find it difficult to park downtown. A lot of people will say, well, it depends on what time I come. Sometimes it's easy, but if I come on Friday night, then yeah, it's difficult. Some had more colorful ways to describe parking. When asked if people were seeing violations, about 70% said no, they haven't. 30 said they had. Generally, people are saying it takes anywhere from just under 5 minutes to 5 to 10 minutes to find a space. And people are generally incorporating that amount of time, planning ahead to look for a space when they come downtown. Although, generally you see some people are saying, I know where to park, so I'll find a space. We asked people, how far is too far to walk from where your parking spot is to your destination? Most people said 3 blocks or more. So that 41% said 3 blocks, others said, 4 to 5. Some people would say not an issue, I'll walk. And we also engaged people that they hadn't parked downtown, they were walking from nearby neighborhoods. We asked what would improve the parking experience downtown. The vast majority of people said more centralized parking, and a number of people added to that. Specifically, I'm talking about build a garage somewhere. Of the people we've engaged thus far, most people are parking on the street if they can find an on-street space, and then most of the people that we engaged were parked in one of the public lots somewhere downtown. And then we thought this was interesting. We did this word cloud of just all of the things that people told us, either that they added as additional comments to the survey or told us as we were talking with them. So you see some themes pop out here. Some of the smaller words you may not be able to see. Really small down at the bottom is the word walking. Really big is garage. So you can kind of see the theme that we're hearing. A desire to locate more essentially provided parking. You see the word no, so that's, a lot of people said, well, I know where to park. So, again, for those with a no, it's not so much of an issue. And some of the things we observed as we've been here over that first week, and I've been up here a couple of additional times. Last Friday, came up for the Arts Festival just to see what's happening at different days, different times of day. Again, the new wayfinding signs really effective at directing people to public lots. But and Kent's already heard this story, but I had my wife come up to 1808 to meet me. She'd never been downtown, and she found this sign across from the library. But then she went in there, and there was this sign. So she didn't know if she actually could park there or not. And we've heard similar things from other people that we've talked to. And then there's just the proliferation of signs and lots of different requirements and regulations, and it gets to the point that it's a lot to stand there and try to absorb and really understand, when can I park here? Can I actually park here? And then the same goes, that's the Justice Center, public lot. Same goes for private lots, lots of reserved, you can't park here signs. But at the same time, this is one at the Gazette building. Lots of people know that they can get away with parking there. It's used heavily, generally kind of like a public lot, even though it's not. And we've observed a lot of opportunities to improve connections between parking lots. I had to update this picture because I was here this weekend and this new pedestrian cut through has been put in. So we were happy to see that.
Seen that before.
Yeah, that's brand new. The picture we had was without that in, so that's pretty fresh. This would also be an opportunity long-term maybe for an actual vehicular connection between lots to improve circulation, but definitely the pedestrian connectivity helps the parking experience as well. And that includes things like improving these interesting little shortcut alleys to get people from those rear parking areas out to the streets. So, Main Street's already looking at doing a project here. That's a great idea. 10-hour, you asked about this. This is the Franklin lot. So you can see the blue head meters, 10-hour meters. So those are located in all the public lots. Our initial observations are, given what we're seeing with demand at peak times, pretty much all of those public spaces I would consider prime spaces at this point. And 10 hours is a long time to have on prime space. So we may, as we move forward, just want to think a little bit more about where's the right distribution and location for 10-hour versus 3-hour or 2-hour. Also, we have had a few people ask if those were handicap, because blue is often used as a handicap. And I did observe a merchant or an employee walk up shop and walk across Sandusky, get in their car. So we've heard concern about that from a variety of folks, and it likely does happen from time to time. Try not to blur that out, not identify anybody. So where are we headed here? That's kind of, to date, kind of our initial observations. We're in the process of analyzing the drone photography, so we have a better understanding of, on a couple of days, how turnover and occupancy is working in various locations of downtown. So we'll be doing that here, taking a look at the land use distribution and occupied space in downtown, and how much more space could be occupied with some of the rehab work that's going on now on the second and third floors, because there's a parking impact to that as well. So we want to understand how the system's working today, and then how that might need to change if there is additional infill development or rehab space and more activity, or residential, office, restaurant activity. And we'll start to put together our initial report of findings and share that with the steering committee. We have our next meeting on the 1st of June. And from there, we'll really be going full force into our set of recommendations for consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions?
I just have one quick one. Just, I doubt you know it's on top of your head, but the slide you showed about how far is too far to walk. Is there a correlation with the age of respondents there? Is that like? There
very well could be. So one of the things that we did with the survey, we tried to keep it short, so we had to be judicious about which questions. So it would be nice to be able to correlate that to age or other demographic characteristics. We're not able to do that with this survey. I'll say, from the people that I engage on the street in a variety of age cohorts, I didn't see an exact correlation, with the exception of those who probably had a handicap placard and expressed a desire for more handicap, specifically handicap accessible parking. So they had obviously a limitation of being able to walk far.
That's all. It's true.
Any other questions? Justin, thanks again for coming up. Appreciate
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Item 2 under discussion is the review of the city ordinance fee schedule for parking lots, handicap parking over the designated parking space line fines.
This is actually, I'll take credit for that being a confusing agenda item and a boatload of supporting material. So summarize it. Really, I'm sorry. Well, simpler than it sounds. Essentially, what we have are 3 sections that we need to clean up, just that language adjustments. Actually, can I get one of those? The first and probably the biggest one will be regarding our handicap violations. We, for as long as I can remember, have had our own handicap fine amount, but we're actually required by the Ohio Revised Code to have it 250, no less than 250, no more than 500. So the first proposal was to adjust our language to meet the language of the Ohio Revised Code. And so we start with the required $250 violation for the first offense, up to $275 for the second, $300 for a third offense, and then up to a maximum of $500 for each offense after that. And that's the numbers and limits prescribed in the Ohio Revised Code. Number two is just the addition of the violation of parking over a parking line. That was inadvertently left out of the fee schedule. The fee schedule contains all the metered and time limit stuff, but this was also a piece in there that I think we looked at that and we felt we could address that as prohibited parking, which is in the fee schedule, but we would rather have that in there specifically just so there's no questions. That was item number two. And then the third one is in regards to crosswalks. We had an issue where we were having cars parking too close to a mid-block crosswalk, and we wrote some tickets on it, and we had a complaint, and when we actually looked at the section actually contains the phrase at an intersection. So really the resolution for that, probably the easiest one that I would recommend is in section 351.03 under subsection F, just strike at an intersection, and that would allow us to enforce within 20 feet of a crosswalk.
I have a question for you, Chief, on number two, kind of. If I'm pulling a trailer on my vehicle, I take up 2 spaces. Is that okay as long as I plug both meters? Or is that really, it's one vehicle, so I'm over the line and now I'm...
I would have to ask to see exactly how, I think most of the time people just pay 2 meters. I have to be honest, I'm guessing at that. I would have to check with parking control, but I think they would allow, pay 2 meters.
Yeah,
We were
okay.
on metered parking though.
I think, I don't know, I guess we try and be reasonable. Quite honestly, I've never dealt with that. We've never been asked to
All right.
follow up on that. I know what you're talking about. I've seen it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and that's, especially as you do a lot of this rehab down here, you see a lot of these guys with...
Well, a lot of the ones that are parking during the day, they ask for restricted parking. So we'll post those. So, if there's I think at they're in the first block north of William Street, they were doing a lot of major rehab inside the 2nd and 3rd floors. And we let them reserve 2 spaces. We signed off on 2 spaces so they could have it there. That was convenient.
Okay.
So too, just so I understand, if we approve these recommendations, then it goes to council as an ordinance, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. What's the wish of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I make a recommendation that this committee approves these changes as submitted by Chief Pijanowski to forward to City Council for full approval.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hellinger?
Yes.
Chairman Schaefer?
Yes. So we've approved these, I'll move on to City Council as an ordinance. And discussion number 3 is the discussion of commercial vehicle and truck parking in residential areas.
This is just cleaning up language to include more current language. Our ordinance currently talks about gross vehicle weight, restriction of gross vehicle weight, and actually the language has been updated to be class 1, 2, 3, 4. So we are updating that, maintaining the same exact requirements, but just updating the language.
Chief, does that include I hate to call this company, I just one that comes to my head, like those Snap-on tool trucks? I see a lot of the sales reps who use those vehicles will park them at their homes. Is that?
I would have to look at what class they are, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, the class 3, I think the maximum that's allowed for on-street parking is a class 3, which I think is like an F-350. After that, I think it's class 4 and higher. It's limited to a certain amount of time in residential areas.
Okay.
And this came up, we were getting complaints about it was a van, but it was used as a work van. So it was more of a question of why is it parked there when it's a work van? And we started having the conversation about gross vehicle weight. And then it was, the discussion centered around, well, with all his equipment, he weighs over that. And the standard is not what the loaded, what the weight that the van's carrying. It's the sticker weight, which, so, that's where we realized that other ordinances have been updated to the new terminology. So we have moved to update our language.
The especially like the F-450s are very popular now with people that haul horse trailers. And they look just like an F-350. They're no bigger. They're just a bigger engine and different drivetrain on them. Does it make sense to, if you want to restrict commercial vehicles, restrict commercial vehicles other than cars that have commercial plates on them? And just say, hey, if you have a truck with a common plate on it, then you can, because I could see, if my neighbor hauls horses and he has his F-450 and it looks just like my F-350, but he can't park there, but he has private plates on it. It's not a commercial vehicle. Mm-hmm. But he would be subject to this commercial vehicle and truck parking regulation, as I understand it.
Technically, yes. I will confess that's a complaint-driven issue, and most of the time we're dealing with. We had a dump truck that was parked for a couple days in a neighborhood. We have the larger work trucks. We have campers and motorhomes that are typically what we deal with, not necessarily a larger pickup truck.
So this language that we're proposing is pretty much mirrors.
It doesn't change anything. It just updates the language.
Okay.
This is another one. Let's go to council then. Or is this?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that that this committee recommend to City Council that the commercial vehicle classification terminology is updated and sent on to City Council for full approval.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hellinger?
Yes.
Chairman Schaefer?
Yes. That one will also move on to City Council. Moving on to new business, item number 5. The first item under new business is on-street parking consistency in neighborhoods and how fire code. Mr. Chief, I'm going to assume it's you.
It is. Thank you, and good evening. If you prefer, I have a PowerPoint presentation, but in light of time, if you like, I can just do it with the handouts if that's okay. Thank you. And as you may recall, several times we have been here discussing neighborhood parking and specifically requests by the general public to allow parking on one side of the street in some neighborhoods or in some areas, both sides of the street. And there's been in some of those discussions both positive in keeping the current restrictions and in some cases totally against that. But through those discussions, we've also identified there's been inconsistencies throughout our city with the application. Most recently, last summer, the Lofton Circle, as we were going through that discussion, Stockard Loop, which wasn't too far from that location, the same standards didn't apply to that. Also, Bettman, about a year and a half ago, Bettman and Silversmith was an issue with how parking was being handled in that area. And then most recently, a decision that was made back in 2012 came up, and that was dealing with Brendan Loop. So I thought it was best if I could just explain a little bit of how the fire code and how we got to where we're at, brought that before the Parking Safety Committee. With also, I think, a little bit of history, it's been council's desire to allow parking, on-street parking, as much as possible, provided it did not interfere with public safety. And I think that's also been the stance for the Parking and Safety Committee. From a fire department focus, we look at it in a multitude of ways. First, we want to maintain, it's been our focus that what has currently been out there be maintained. We were not going to go in and even if it did not meet the criteria, go back in and make modifications to the existing streets and say, okay, no longer are we going to allow parking on this side of the street. Second, we wanted to ensure compliance with the codified ordinances of the city of Delaware as well as the Ohio Fire Code. And also we wanted to ensure access to our fire hydrants located throughout our city. So with that, as far as the requirements, on April 12, we made an update to Chapter 1507.21 of the codified ordinances that dealt and gave essentially myself the authority to establish fire lanes within the city of Delaware. That was approved with Ordinance 12-29. On October 8th, 2012, Chapter 1501 was adopted, and we made several modifications to the Ohio to the codified ordinances dealt with the Ohio Fire Code. Including with that was when we adopted the Ohio Fire Code, we also adopted Appendix D, and that was fire department access roads. And fire department access roads are also defined as fire lanes here in the state of Ohio. And essentially what the Ohio Fire Code says is that roads 20 feet in width to 26 feet, they're posted fire lanes on both sides of those streets. For roads greater than 26 feet but less than 32, fire lane sign is posted on one side of the street. So with that, you can see a little bit, as we talked a little bit about the changes in our street width that we've been working with the engineer's office. There's some modifications or some conflict just with that. Why are these requirements specific? If you go back to our PowerPoint presentation that we did with the Lofton Circle, and that street was 26 foot wide. When you look at our fire apparatus, and essentially, if you look at the core width of the truck, we're 8 feet. But along with that, when you start opening doors to get out of the apparatus, you start opening compartment doors, you start establishing, opening our compartments to get equipment out of it. For our ladder truck, extending the outriggers out on it, you're looking at additional street width that's needed for that to operate where we do not cause damage and are able to perform the job that we end up doing. And the first slide that you see, you can see our ladder truck there, and with the outriggers, it's essentially 18 feet in width. So when you look at having one car on a 26-foot wide street, it really restricts our operation. And I know it's been brought up, we'll just locate the fire truck someplace else. Well, when you're dealing with some of our trucks and with the hose lengths that we have pre-connected that allow for our efficient operation, or a ladder truck in this, when you start looking at it, we have to put these in specific locations. We cannot just maneuver around what's existing there. The reason being is, even though you look at a 100-foot ladder truck, when you look at the length that the fire truck has to reach to get to that piece of property, because that width, that length starts at the middle of the street where that truck is, and then you start looking at setbacks of 70 feet from the curb and to the curb width, you can see it's going to make a difference in us being able to even get to a two-story house. So that's provided that's set up in the center of where that house is. So with that, my recommendation for us is a three-point process. Number one is just to continue to allow existing on-street parking that is currently in place. In other words, we don't make any changes to currently what we have located in our city. Secondly, when a request comes before us for more on-street parking, that it be permissible if it's compliant with the existing Ohio Fire Code. In other words, if it's between 20 and 26 feet, the fire lane signs will be still required to be posted on both sides. Those that currently don't have it will remain in place. However, roads 26 to 32 feet in width, fire lane will be required on one side of the street. And then new developments, as they are brought in, will be required to follow the adopted requirements as we have it.
So for clarification, Chief.
Sure.
So the road's 20 to 26 feet, that essentially means no parking on either side.
That is correct.
Okay, the other one is parking on one side.
One side, that is correct.
Chief, you're not recommending changes to existing
No,
neighborhoods?
that's I wanted to make clear, and that's why we will continue to have some of these inconsistencies throughout our city, is when some of these subdivisions went in, for whatever reason, the developer did not put up the proper signage and so forth, those are existing. And I don't feel it's right when, unless we end up getting into a issue which will bring, we would bring forth to the parking and safety, to go back in and now restrict that parking at this point in time with something they've already enjoyed.
So if a resident then coming before us and said, well, what's the reasoning not to have a consistent policy? What's the answer?
And I guess that's a decision for you as parking and safety to make. If you want us to go back through and make all the changes so they are consistent, we could do that. But I think what we would be doing at this point in time is creating quite an outcry with their
No, I
existing.
agree with you. I just that's the question.
And
I mean, that would be my answer.
It's just grandfathered in.
And that's why I was going to make the comment about being grandfathered. We have those type of situations when we build new buildings that are required to be sprinkled. At this point in time, older buildings are not required to be sprinkled. We don't go back and make those modifications as such. And it's trying to work with our citizens and their stakeholders.
Yeah, I know I talked to Dave Eflin on this a couple months ago. And just from a standpoint of asking him, would it be possible to, on new developments, get more of a setback from your house, from the front lot, therefore you have a larger driveway? Because now you could physically put 4 cars or 5 cars in the driveway. A lot of the setbacks in our existing neighborhoods are such that you can only get maybe 2 cars in it. So then, therefore, if your kid starts driving, he's got to park on the street. And again, that doesn't help anything that's grandfathered in, but going forward, it could help diminish that requirement, the capacity of on-street parking. Yeah, I don't know.
And I know this is something that's come up with the BIA as well as our street width. And I've contacted other fire departments and they said, if you can keep exactly what you got, you're better off. Many of the jurisdictions here in Delaware County and elsewhere have longer driveways where they're able to afford the ability to have on-street, or I'm sorry, on-property parking where we do not have some of that capability. So I think it's a fair balance of how we are approaching this.
Yeah, I agree. And, given like your examples here with the truck and all that, I mean, I would like to think that most of the time in a response situation, it's very rare that you're going to have a continual line of cars on both sides of the street. So chances are you guys are going to be able to find someone's there I mean, we certainly don't want to restrict your access to these houses, but given that most of these neighborhoods, you're not going to have the street line on both sides, I'm confident that we can, in most cases, probably get the truck in there and do what we need to do. So I think that's a reasonable request. So essentially, we're not changing anything.
No.
But we're asking, do we already have does planning already have the standard?
Yes, and actually we'll continue. I know we work with Matt Weber, Charlie Cooper Ryder from my office when a new subdivision comes in. We'll sit down at a technical review committee where we'll review this type of stuff. So we'll ensure that we still keep this incorporated in.
So do you need action from this committee?
No, we've already had this information approved. I think it was more of just some additional questions that have come up. I thought it was the right time to just really provide a more overview because inconsistency has been an issue that has come up.
Anything else? Thanks, Chief. So next on the new business is citywide traffic signals.
I'll take this, Mr. Chair. We've talked a lot at staff and with council, with public about moving Delaware forward. Talked a lot about the point. I just wanted to give you an update tonight so you know that we did not forget about our signal system.
Because you know I would forget about it.
That's right. We've done a lot of research. We engaged a consultant purposefully and engaged a consultant different from the one that's doing the point application for us. And you marry that consultant with our in-house traffic engineer, who's very bright, just really short on time. So we had to bring in some help. And we've got a draft application in our minds that we're actually going to start filling out here soon. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply for MORPC funding. The acronym CMAQ funding is our targeted funding source, congestion mitigation air quality funding. And in order to, I think, craft a successful application for something in the magnitude of $1.5 million to maybe $2 million as a first phase of citywide improvements, we've quickly realized that we have to target certain corridors. And what we've done so far is we've decided that we're going to focus as like a, if I had to call it, it would be phase one. The application will clearly be phase one so that we can keep the door cracked for future phases as we move forward. I think it'd be very complicated if we chose the corridor that we're studying for the point as our first phase. So we purposefully stayed, maybe for obvious reasons, west of 23 and started at 23 on William and 23 on Central. And the two corridors plus Sandusky Street from William Street south make a total of 3 corridors, possibly a fourth on London Road. So again, Central Avenue will start at 23 and we'll go as far west as Lexington, maybe to Houck, depending on where we're at with our what we call our ask for grant funds. Mm-hmm. On William Street, again, we'll start at 23 and our application will cover all the intersections west out to Applegate, possibly again going, or Curtis, possibly going out to Applegate and maybe even out to Houck. Some of the major things that the major line items in our application will be, hopefully we'll get a lot of our controllers updated, which will, what we have to do is we have to target items in, we can't just go in, unfortunately, and say we want to do 20 new installations. We want to take a third of our signals and just totally revamp them. We have to pick components that are going to help us with timing and interconnect and communication between signals. Now, if there are side effects that, let's say we need certain signal cabinet components as well, those are going to be totally eligible based on the fact that the signal wouldn't be able to operate because you just swapped out, let's say, a new controller. So it looks promising. The criteria we've applied ourselves to, and it's literally like a self-assessment, looks very promising on both Central. Well, the area that's looks overwhelmingly promising is on 23 on Central Avenue from 23. I'd say 6 or 7 intersections west until you get to Euclid or all the way out to Troy Road. There's a lot of improvement that can be done there with replacing equipment. And Sandusky Street as well looks very promising. We have a lot of timing issues on Sandusky Street that are often overlooked because we're always discussing William and Central, it seems like, in all of our major transportation discussions. So we will be submitting an application here in about 3 weeks, screen application. It will, out of all honesty, be competing with the point, but it'll be targeting separate funding sources. So there's still hope that they won't be head-to-head competitors. And we will need to prioritize our applications. But we think that we have potential of putting together a really strong application. We'll probably find out on Thanksgiving or sooner, maybe. Thanksgiving. Hopefully we get some good news around Thanksgiving to be able to bring back to you as far as how we scored, and maybe there might be a reduced amount, or maybe we'll get what we asked for. One of the attractive parts of the funding that is normally attributed to signals is that you can get up to 100% funding for construction. So there's an opportunity there to possibly reserve any of our local funds to fast track the design component of the improvements and get us to a construction date sooner than later. No promises there, but there is more flexibility. Signals seem to score very, very high, and for some reason don't demand as much local match. And we think we know what that's from. And since I'm on YouTube, I don't want to give away our secrets to winning grant applications. No, I'm joking. There's just not many applications put in, so I think it's a good time.
Good. I hope we get it. Chris, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, moving on to old business, we've got 2 things. The North Sandusky Street parking reduction, and then the conversation about the one-way alley conversion at Union Street Alley.
Mr. Chairman, John Melvin is here, but we are still at a point where we have a draft MOU. I know the direction previously was to finalize this draft. We are getting close. We have the draft MOU. I talked to the city manager today, and he wanted me to distribute the copy of that draft. That's where we are right now in terms of that reduction. I think we're still waiting for the attorneys to concur on the language and then get in front of the boards to approve.
Chief, is there mention in here of this, is part of this discussion, the parking spaces that we've been asked to vacate in front of the?
Well, once this is signed, then the anticipation would be we would abandon those spaces.
Okay, because I'm not seeing, maybe I'm just not seeing.
I think this is the MOU for use of the county lots.
Right.
Correct.
There's a separate issue, and that's we'll have to have a resolution that goes to council, actually limiting parking in this area that's 70 spaces where the bump out.
Right, I think that's what we got into the last meeting, is that
Right.
we thought we were moving ahead with that, and then we didn't. So
Right.
should just maybe make a recommendation to council to, provided that the MOU gets approved, that we.
I think that would probably be appropriate unless you want a crack at the final MOU before it goes to council. In talking to the city manager this morning, he thought it may be prudent that if you're generally okay with the concept of abandoning that parking, if we get the MOU in good shape, that perhaps that could be a recommendation to council, and let full council make the decision on whether or not the MOU is appropriate or not with the recommendation from you tonight. So you still have a shot at it at full council level, but doesn't have to wait 3 more months and come back to this committee.
You want to do that one?
Yeah, sure. All right, so I make a motion that we accept the parking reduction on North Sandusky contingent upon the signage of this MOU as it's presented to us today and forward to council for their consideration.
I second that.
Roll call, please. Yeah, whatever you got up there.
I can listen to it.
Okay.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Hillinger?
Yes.
Chairman Schaefer?
Yes. That motion passes. And then the one-way alley at Union Street.
I'll take that one. And if you recall, on March 4th, I sent around an email regarding, I discovered some issues on the topic. And although at the time we thought we should bring it to council, city manager wanted to bring it back to this committee again, just to go over these things. On January 4th, I listened to that tape several times, and there was clearly some confusion over where the alley should and should not go. And what we finally resolved was it was thrown out late in the hour. Why don't we just pick this logical point at this north-south alley, and there's exhibits in here. That make a logical point. I unfortunately was not at the meeting. I was home with the flu, so when I started reading through this, I thought, no, I would have stood up and said, no, I really don't recommend that, because there's some real site restrictions and some alley width concerns through there. I included some of the pictures there. And I guess to make a long story short, what's presented tonight is to reconsider. It really should be the 115 feet across the Union Building's parking area as a two-way, and then it should be one-way going up the hill for a couple reasons. One is once you commit to going up that hill, there's no turning around because there's not width. You're not going to see someone coming out of the garage or coming out of the alley, south side. So you're going to both be facing the same direction, both be facing that. I'm looking for a way to go. That's one of the primary reasons why we're saying it really, with much additional traffic that will be added with the county's project and that level of the garage emptying out to the alley, the probability of having 2 cars meeting face to face is very, very high. So we're not as concerned down in front of the Union Building at 115 feet because there is parking area, there is width for someone to go side by side if you had to. And more than likely, if someone's coming in from Union Street going in there, they're probably visiting that building, they're an employee there or visitor to that building, so they'll be pulling immediately into the parking lot. So my recommendation will be before this goes as a resolution to council is that we that we adjust our recommendation, that we go with the 115 feet west of Union being a two-way alley, and then from that point to Sandusky Street goes to a one-way alley eastbound. And I'd also talked with Scott Miller, who's here tonight, too, and we had some additional discussion. He had some concerns regarding the additional traffic too. He may or may not want to speak here tonight, but want to acknowledge him and if he does. But that would be our recommendation, is to limit the two-way section basically in front of the existing parking lot in Union Building, which is about 115 feet west of Union Street.
What meeting was that?
January 4th.
The county is okay with that as well?
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but John is here.
Good evening. John Melvin, Manager Facilities for Delaware County. The only concern I have, really, it creates a left in and left out of the county facility. Now granted, hopefully most of that traffic is going to be going in the same direction, but that's the only concern I can see with that, creating that one way.
Without a map, I totally think I'm looking at pictures.
In your packet, there's this exhibit you're looking for.
You'll see the little arrow kind of pointing toward the parking entrance. So traffic would be, coming from Sandusky Street, would have to turn left in, crossing the traffic, who would maybe exiting that level of parking, having to turn left out, going down the alleyway. So I don't know if, I had similar discussions with Mr. Miller this afternoon too, looking at this, hearing his concern for the amount of parking, especially 4:30 in the afternoon, everybody's leaving that. There's approximately 58 parking spots in that level of parking. So again, all this parking will be assigned secured parking. So we'll look at who's assigned there and try to manage through that some of the traffic. But maybe the alternative would be flow the traffic the other way, so it's a right in, right out. County, I think we recognize the fact that this is an alleyway that obviously is not on your priority for snow removal. So we will be maintaining snow removal, keeping this open so that that our staff, and this also the level that the prisoner transport would enter the facility. So we will have to maintain that through the winter, keep that hill salted and accessible.
So Bill, this question may not even make sense, but is there a reason that we just don't make the whole alley one way? Is there a reason to have that small portion be two way?
Yes, and Scott could probably, our original recommendation was with additional traffic, it can only be one way, the whole alley. After discussions about the east end with Scott and some others, we said, well, because of the width, we can probably do two-way there. It's from the very beginning, the discussion was always, let's go one way eastbound down to Union Street to provide people probably a little bit better access when they're exiting it, because they can turn right and then from Union at Central make any choice they want. Going one way up the hill to Sandusky Street is a little tougher, because if you want to go left, you have crossed over all the traffic without a signal. So there's trade-offs.
Absolutely.
Trade-offs.
Recognize that. And then that was the original thinking too. The narrowest part of the alleyway is right next to the church in that parking lot.
The other consideration was the winter time, and we have a separate MOU with the county that they'll take care of the alley, but we did have a concern with our preference of let's let people go down the alley. So if there's an issue with snow and ice, you can continue on, not block. Where if you're going one way and going westbound, you have a probability of getting stuck on the alley on that hillside right there. So there's a couple of reasons why we chose eastward direction as opposed to westward direction.
I understand that, but what's the need to have that small 115-foot section at the east side of that two-way? What purpose is that, sir?
Well, primarily it was to allow the existing parking lot that's there right west of Union to have immediate access off of Union without having to come from Sandusky over to
that church, didn't it? Wasn't there
there's also, Mr. Miller has parking on the north side of the alleyway. There's an immediate row of parking right off of Union Street that you would have to go clear up and down and get to.
Okay.
We recognize that,
right.
So this is the best solution we can come up with that we can all live with.
I believe so.
even with what John just mentioned, his concerns?
Yeah, I mean, we recognize there's no ideal solution. Hoping the majority of the traffic should be flowing in the same direction.
And
during the middle of the day, you may have some crossing traffic entering and exiting, but
as I understood it, the majority of folks on that level are signed
all the parking will be assigned,
So
so,
very quickly, they'll become familiar with the movements and know to watch out for people coming in and out because they're doing this every day.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a visitor space where you may not know someone could be crossing over. So our feeling is the people will become accustomed to the new parking arrangement and appropriate caution will be displayed as they drive through there.
yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's definitely, we do not want people trying to find spots. They will be all assigned spots, so they know exactly where they're going.
So the picture is how we did before, this is how it is in the recommendation.
That's correct. This picture, Chris,
The first 115 feet is
Yes.
a two-way,
that's correct.
and the balance is a one-way.
Correct.
I did that.
So we need to recommend this to city council for approval.
I think Scott, Mr. Miller.
I would like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Scott Miller, one of the owners of the building at 103 North Union Street. I was here in January. And I think one of the reasons that I think all of us need to keep in mind is with the new courthouse going where it is, we should be trying to at least minimize the impact of the neighbors. And number two, when we had this discussion back in January, one of the reasons I believe that you were permitting the two-way traffic to go to that east-west alley, which unfortunately we don't have that screen up here, but
Right.
north-south alley, I think everyone knows which one I'm talking about, was to help with circulation. And I like that idea because it provided additional circulation. So now, and I understand Bill's position. We're all trying to be reasonable here. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we're now restricting another avenue of circulation. And initially, when I was saw this, for some reason, I was under the impression wrongly that that level of parking that was coming off of the alley was merely for sheriff transport. So to me, that was not a big deal, whether it was the cruisers or the transport vans. To me, that was a limited amount and also at limited times. I've been corrected now, and there's actually going to be 58 parking spaces in that level that's going to be served by only the alley. And that does bother me. So I've got a couple of thoughts that I'd like to see about adding to the proposed motion. And let me explain again that my building is this building here, and our parking is those spaces on the north side of that alley. And it would be just a disaster for our businesses if, with an address of 103 North Union Street, to try to get people to figure out how to get there. There are numerous businesses in there, a lot of people that are not just from the city of Delaware patronizing the businesses there. And to give them a 103 North Union Street and then try to tell them how to get there, I think you've just created a real hassle and a burden upon me as one of the property owners. So you can also note that, John was thinking it was vacated. I'm not aware it's been vacated, but no matter what, if it's not been vacated, there's this unopened alley there. John, you know what you want to talk about. Yep. The one we talked about. And if it's been vacated, that means the county owns half of it and I own the other half, or maybe my partner owns the other half. And once again, it just seems like circulation is the key to all this. And so I'm concerned that many of the courthouse employees, their quitting times at 4:30. And we're going to force those people then to go east. And then they're going to get stacked there. Won't take too many to get stacked on my parking lot space area. And Bill's right.
we've been there since what, 97 or something like that. And it's been two-way, it's been two-way forever. So it's never really been an issue. And I don't know that it'll be an issue, but it's been forced upon me to come here twice now. And since whatever happens here is going to have an impact upon me, it seems to me that we should have the flexibility to provide another circulation there. And it seems to me then that the next step is to require the county to open that alley, or if it's not an alley, to work with us to open it so that it provides another avenue of circulation, which goes right through their own parking lot then, which has two curb cuts onto Union Avenue. And I don't see that that's causing anything bad. In fact, I think it's good, because if you get 58 cars leaving at 4:30, then they're all stacked up on that alley and on that hill. And this gives them another way to get out, two other curb cuts to get through that parking lot. And since the county is going to have to come through and re-improve that alley anyway, I can't see that that's going to be that much of a burden on the county. And if I was one of those 58 drivers, then I would say, gee, it's stacked there. I'm going to cut through. I'm not going to use the word. That's not bad. That's a bad choice of words. I'm going to go through the county parking lot because it provides me other access to Union Street. So I guess I have three things I would propose to your motion. One is that the county be required to have an additional exit through where that alley is, or through their own land, because if they got it vacated, then they own half of it, and I'll cooperate with them if that's the case. The second option is that we should require that the county balance their assignment of employees' parking spots. And I know John will, and I know the current county commissioners will. They all get along, and they've been very cooperative with me. But I'm concerned 10 years from now, when John retired and those current county commissioners have moved on, and they don't remember the history, and they forget that I was there before they were. And it just seems to me that somewhere in our motion, we need to have in there that the county needs to balance the assignment of employees' parking spots to prevent the level exiting onto the alley from being used by large numbers of employees whose quitting times are about the same time. And then number two, or that's number two. Number three is, if the county, let me back up. There are numerous county-owned vehicles kept on the east side of Union Street in the county's parking lot. I don't know how many, 15, 10, that's a good number.
Yeah.
But there's a good number there, and I don't know, they'll probably continue to keep some of them there, but I could see some of them being parked in the garage. And I see the access onto Sandusky Street and the access from the other level coming off of, there's three levels here. So I see the level that exits and enters and exits off of Sandusky Street, and the level that exits and enters off of the, what we want to call the Union County parking lot, to be fairly easily accessible. It's this alley, to me, I think, is what's causing problems. We got 58 parking spaces. So I think the second or the third item I would recommend is the following. If the county decides to assign spaces for parking county vehicles on one of the courthouse levels, then the level that exits onto the alley should be the primary level for those county-owned vehicles. And you then see what I've done is those vehicles are not leaving at 4:30 for the most part, and it's going to prevent that alley from being as chaotic as it would if you've got, of those 58 spaces, if you still got 10 or 15 of them being used by county vehicles that aren't going to go anywhere at 4:30 most likely. So that's my three suggestions. Once again, John's been great to work with, the county commissioners. Bill has been, I mean, I'm not here to I'm here to try to work out something that's good for everybody. And I just think that, number one, we got to have an additional circulation, dumping all those vehicles on a one entrance into Union Street or exit into Union Street. It's just uncalled for. And that's why my first suggestion that they should have another access going into their parking lot that's off of Union Building. Number two, that they need to balance the assignment employees' parking spots to prevent the level exiting onto the alley from being used by large numbers of employees whose quitting times are about the same time. And number three, if the county decides to assign spaces for parking county vehicles on one of the courthouse levels, then the level that exits onto the alley should be the primary level. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mill and I talked earlier today regarding the connection between the alley and the lot to the north. It'd be the additional piece of pavement about the width of this room, the short direction, across fairly level ground. So I think it's probably a fairly easy addition for something the county to do as part of their project. And it was mentioned the alley is being reconstructed because of additional traffic. It's probably a reasonable request. I think there's some benefit to what talking about additional circulation points. It gives some folks coming down there an alternative, say they want to turn north on Union. They don't get stuck behind someone in the alley trying to turn south. So that's a benefit. The other 2 points, I guess my recommendation would be if we want to talk about some specific parking related restrictions or requests as part of the whole parking of the garage, that those could be issues perhaps addressed with the parking MOU that we just talked about on the prior item, which governs the use of the garage that the county's building, and perhaps an additional section about county agreeing to certain assignments. It's certainly something I think John could probably bring back to the county for some additional discussion. I would separate the two issues, and maybe one, if there's some agreement we want this one way, this having to impact the alley and make it one way and tie it to provide more circulation alternatives, that would be associated with this issue, and see if the county would agree to, again, what to hear back from John, construct that additional piece of pavement to make a connection. And then two, the issues regarding use of the garage be attached to the MOU of the garage.
John, do you have any other comments you want to add?
Yeah, no, not at the time, but I definitely will take that back to county administrator and the board. And we'll absolutely consider this.
Sure.
So do we need to?
We can't move forward though until he gets back.
Right, yeah, so-
We're just kind of agrees to.
Our scheduled completion date is June 30th of 2017, so.
Don't know if it's not a rush.
I have one suggestion, and maybe you already have this covered, but keep in mind that when you're thinking about how your employees will get to the new courthouse, 23 in Pennsylvania will be full movement interchange. So that provides a totally different way to get there to work. So if you have employees that are traveling from the south, they'd probably be better off going to the new Sandusky Street, Pennsylvania interchange, turning left and doubling back, probably get there a lot quicker, and vice versa going home. So as you're talking about circulation, it's going to be a really important back door to the courthouse.
Yes.
Seems to me like part of this is we just kind of have to wait and see for some of how the traffic flow works once it's all done. I can see potential backups on Sandusky Street, arriving in the morning, waiting to turn left into the alley to get to the garage. I can see potential backups getting out onto Union Street at night, but really we don't know what we don't know at this point. So we're going to have to maintain some flexibility, I think, as we move forward.
Yes, and I think to earlier topics you've discussed, I think there's a lot we can address through controls. Assignment of spaces, who parks where, how those are utilized.
On the prior item, we referred that by motion to full council regarding the parking spaces in the MOU. On this item, we can do the same and bring the resolution to the alley and perhaps the connection of the parking lot to the alley to full council, or you can want to see this back at your level again because of the complexities involved and wait to hear back from the
I would say until it comes back.
I would agree, that's kind of the purpose of this committee, is that
Yeah.
we'll wait till it comes
And if
back.
that's the case, you may want to take the prior item, because now it's attached to potentially some parking lot assignment. You want to hear that back here as well.
So you
Yeah,
wouldn't,
it's true, it is.
They are related.
you mean the MOU?
They are related,
Yeah,
both
so-
are related. They all involve additional traffic and parking restrictions and
Again, from my end, I think everything was brought up tonight seems reasonable to me. It just, I don't think this board can make a recommendation on something that we need county, approval on or
I
or
agree.
agreement on, so we'd have to bring it back, so.
Well, our first motion was to approve those 7 spaces pursuant to the signing of this MOU. We can still make that recommendation, it's just that this MOU may not get signed for some time because we're waiting for these other issues.
That's
So I don't see a reason to withdraw that motion. Sure.
And I hope within 3 months, we could have resolution on all issues and be able to bring back the final recommendation to the committee.
That would be great.
So just for my clarification, everything this gentleman brought up makes total sense to you as well? And
Yeah,
it seems everything is reasonable to everybody?
Yes, the only thing I could think of is, the site development plan has been approved and adding another access, that alley access probably would, I don't know how your city planner and
I think
site
we could-
development
I'll
would have to
talk
look at
with
that.
I think we could do it as administrative.
Okay.
Administrative addition, with the recommendation of this committee.
One quick question. So is your building the one that the Carolyn's in and Marion Gable on it? So just out of curiosity, you said about changing the address. Why would that change how you tell people to get there? I wasn't following on that.
If you did not permit it to be two-way, and now suddenly you could only go eastbound the entire width, then how are you gonna get to my place?
But the first 115, well, past your place was two-way.
No. That's why we're wanting it to be two-way. Because otherwise, if you didn't make it two-way,
If the whole alleyway was to remain one way, that's why we added that 115 feet.
Because otherwise they'd have to get to his parking lot, coming
You'd have-
off of
yeah, you
Sandusky,
gotta-
all the way
you gotta
down the
go
alley
Sandusky
to
Street,
get
come down.
Well, I guess that's what I'm
north.
asking. How do you tell them to get there? I mean, because that's why I asked you this earlier, because the first 115 feet goes past his property, well past his property,
Well, his alley-
which is two-way, which we want to be two-way.
Yes.
So why would,
It's not that very far past.
the picture is pretty far past.
no, my parking lot it'd be 100, if that alley was vacated, my parking lot is 107.5 feet.
You don't have to just pull in your parking lot, pull back out and go out the same way?
Can I prove?
Yeah, please. Wish you guys would have punched at me or something.
Here's my parking lot right here.
Right.
So you gotta pull in and you park this way.
parked in the door.
So how,
Pull back out and go out that way.
that's what we're trying, that's what we want.
That's why the two ways.
If it wasn't a two-way, he would have to come all the way down here.
Well, this last time we had this all in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm with you.
All right.
I know.
It's confusing.
I'm with you.
Anything else on this issue?
Nothing.
Thank you all very much. Item number 8 is committee comments. Mr. Jones?
I have none.
Chairman Hill?
I'm speechless.
I have none as well. Is there a move to adjourn?
Chairman Schaefer,
Yes.
I do have one item that I was asked to bring up.
We'll try.
This will take a while. No, it's regarding First Friday and the street closure. We've seen it last year, and we saw a repeat of it this year at the First Friday that involves the 2 north blocks. We have 2 more this summer that involve the 2 north blocks. And the traffic on Winter Street is problematic with the volume of pedestrians we have and a lot of near misses. There was a rumor that someone got hit. That didn't happen. He had a medical emergency. But we have discussed this, and we are going to be speaking with some of the restaurant owners on Winter Street to find out how we can close Winter to allow that pedestrian movement to occur safely and not impact their businesses. So we'll be talking to 1808. He owns the 2 restaurants on East Winter, and also to Buns, just to make sure that we touch base with them prior to doing that. But we're most likely going to be shutting down Winter Street at Sandusky Street because of that issue.
Chief, let me ask you a question. There was a police officer in that intersection that night, but I noticed that he was not doing any pedestrian control. I mean, couldn't we just control the pedestrians so Winter Street could eventually move?
you know, we've changed our sights on this. I've brought in 2 extra duty officers to work that event. And so we put one there and one down at William Street, and they're trying to work both blocks. So the one was generally in the middle, and he's trying to watch both sides. So they shade towards the East Winter Street side. Even when they're there yelling at people, there's still people who don't realize that that's still an open intersection and are walking out.
I mean, it's a legitimate problem, but I think keeping Winter Street open is also important. And I think when you talk with those businesses, they're probably going to tell them that. So, I mean, I noticed that when we were down there, the pedestrians just kept coming, and poor people that were stopped on Winter Street couldn't get any movement at all.
Now we've watched, and in the, you know, the restaurants are doing business, but I know when we did it previously, it impacted at least 1808, and I think it's the way the signage has been done in the past. So that's one of the things we're looking at doing differently. We're going to reach out, and you know, obviously we are fairly close to recommending that, but I think we do need to discuss it with them first, and that's I've directed my captains to reach out and talk it over with them and find out how we can do that where they think it will be less impact, and try and get their buy-in on it.
Chief, who's paying the bill for those 2 officers?
City of Delaware.
Interesting.
It's gotten to the point, and I think it's not just First Friday, but that's such a big event, and you know, it reflects well on the city, I think. And even without those street closures, we had so many people downtown that I felt there was a need for a safety presence there. So we started bringing officers in.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one quick thing. Are you getting full compliance out of international paper and everything now with traffic? And
Yes, there was the injunction. It was agreed upon by both parties. So after we had it a little bit rough on Monday, I believe it was, and we you know, I guess I talked to him personally, both sides. I, you know, been in contact with them on a fairly regular basis, trying to make sure everyone's playing by the rules. We set up some rules that they didn't necessarily like, but Tuesday there was a lot more compliance, and then the national paper did get an injunction on Tuesday, and over the past couple days, it's generally been adhered to.
Anything else from anyone? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
so
We're adjourned at 8:52. Thank you, everyone.